Welcome to my channel. Please support by subscribing, liking, and sharing. Thank you. Now, let's begin our story. The sun had already dipped behind the maple trees that lined Willowbrook Street, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The air felt soft, like the kind of evening that promised something unexpected. Ethan Miller wasn't the type to believe in fate. But that night, something about the quiet hum of the town felt different. He had just moved from Boston to a small coastal town in Maine, hoping to find peace, or at least something that didn't hurt. As much as the city memories he'd left behind, he was standing outside Harper's Cafe, holding a steaming cup of black coffee. When she walked in, her name was Clara Bennett, though he didn't know it yet. All he noticed was her smile, soft, kind, and disarmingly pure. She smiled at everyone, the barista, the old couple near the window, even at the little boy who dropped his cookie. And then, she smiled at him. Ethan froze. It wasn't just a smile. It was the kind that made you feel seen, as if she understood something about you without needing to ask. He didn't even realize he was staring until she tilted her head, amused, and said in a voice as calm as the sea, "New around here." That's when it began. He laughed awkwardly. "That obvious?" She chuckled. "Just a bit. No one stands outside Harper's like they're waiting for permission to go in." Her teasing tone made him smile for the first time in weeks. Something about her, the lightness, the warmth chipped away at the walls he'd built since his last heartbreak. Inside, they ended up sitting across from each other, talking about things that didn't seem important but somehow felt like everything: music, favorite places, why small towns feel safer than cities. Clara had a way of speaking that made even silence feel comfortable, but there was something else. A small flicker in her eyes, something unspoken every time Ethan mentioned the word honesty. He didn't notice it then, but later, he would realize it was the beginning of everything he never expected. Clara worked at a small art studio across town. She painted landscapes, the kind that made people stop and stare, as if they were looking at a memory instead of a picture. Ethan started visiting her there after work, pretending he was just curious about art. She saw through it, of course, but never said anything. Their connection grew naturally. Every afternoon, they'd talk, sometimes for hours, about dreams, fears, and second chances. And every time she smiled, Ethan felt a little more alive. One evening, as rain softly tapped against the windows, Clara told him, "You remind me of someone who used to believe in love." Ethan looked up, surprised. "Used to?" She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes this time. "Some things change when you realize love can hurt, even when it's honest." Her words hung in the air, heavy yet delicate. Ethan didn't press her. Something about her tone told him she wasn't ready. Still, he couldn't shake the thought. What had she meant? Why did her smile, once innocent and open, suddenly feel like it carried a story she wasn't ready to share? Weeks turned into months. They became inseparable, though neither of them ever labeled what they were. Some days, it felt like friendship. Other days, something more. One snowy evening, Ethan found Clara standing outside the cafe again, staring at the falling snow. Her hair was dusted with white flakes, her cheeks red from the cold. She looked like a memory he didn't want to lose. "Clara," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" She turned, smiling that same gentle smile that had caught him months ago. "You can ask anything, Ethan." He hesitated. "Why do you always smile when you're sad?" Her expression faltered, just for a moment. Then she laughed quietly. "Because sometimes, it's easier than explaining what's really going on inside." He stepped closer. "Then explain it to me." The silence that followed was long, too long. Clara looked down, her fingers trembling slightly as she gripped her scarf. Then, she looked up with eyes that no longer looked innocent. Her voice was low, almost trembling. "Ethan, there's something you don't know about me." The cafe lights flickered behind her, the snow falling harder now. And just like that, the air between them changed. Her smile, the one that once felt warm and sweet, suddenly felt like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Whatever she was about to say, Ethan knew it would change everything. Snow continued to fall softly outside Harper's Cafe, covering the town in a blanket of white. The world around them felt quiet, too quiet, as if holding its breath, waiting for Clara to speak. Ethan's heart pounded. He didn't know why, but something in her tone, the way her voice trembled, made him realize this wasn't just a small confession. Clara looked down at the ground, her breath visible in the cold air. "You think you know me," she began, her words gentle but strained. "But the truth is, I haven't been completely honest with you." Ethan's throat went dry. "About what?" She looked up, eyes glassy with emotion. "About why I came here. Why I started over in Willowbrook." He waited, the world seeming to fade around them, just her voice, her face, and the falling snow. I wasn't always this person, she continued, the smiling artist with quiet mornings and easy laughter. I used to live in New York, fast life, bright lights, and people who said they loved you but never really did. I worked as a designer, and I was engaged. Ethan froze. The word engaged echoed in his mind like a bell. Clara swallowed hard. We were together for 5 years. I thought he was the one. But when the company we both worked for collapsed, he walked away, not just from the job, but from me. Said I wasn't the same person anymore. Said I was too lost. Her voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, the confident, smiling Clara he knew seemed fragile. Ethan took a small step closer. Clara, she shook her head gently. When I moved here, I told myself I'd never fall for anyone again. I wanted peace to start fresh. And then, she looked at him, tears threatening to fall. You walked into my quiet little world and reminded me what it feels like to care again. That's why I kept smiling, even when I was terrified. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a mix of heartbreak and tenderness. He'd seen pain before, but never like this, not wrapped inside such warmth, not hidden behind such a beautiful smile. He reached out, hesitating before placing his hand gently on hers. You don't have to hide behind a smile with me. Clara let out a shaky laugh. That's the problem, Ethan. You make it too easy to be honest. And I don't know if I'm ready to lose control again. Her words hit him harder than he expected. There it was, the fear beneath her kindness. The reason her laughter always carried a trace of sadness. Ethan wanted to tell her that he understood, that he'd been hurt too, that his move to this town wasn't just about peace, but about running away from the wreckage of his own love story. But he couldn't, not yet. Instead, he said quietly, then don't think about losing control. Just think about what's real right now. Clara's eyes met his, soft, unsure, but searching. The snow fell harder now, blurring the lights of the cafe. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. She whispered, Ethan, do you believe people can really start over? He smiled faintly. Only if they stop pretending they're okay when they're not. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if something deep inside her had finally cracked open. Then maybe, she said softly, it's time I stop pretending. And with that, she walked past him into the softly falling snow, leaving Ethan standing there, his coffee long forgotten, his heart racing with questions. What did she mean by that? Was she saying goodbye, or finally letting him in? That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in his head like a song he couldn't stop hearing. It's time I stop pretending. He replayed every moment, her laughter, her glance, the way she always looked away whenever the talk got too close to love. Was she afraid of him, or afraid of feeling again? By morning, he knew he couldn't let it end there. He had to find her not just to ask what she meant, but to tell her something he'd been hiding too. The next day, the storm cleared. The sun peeked through the melting snow, and the streets glistened like glass. Ethan walked to her art studio, his heart heavy with hope and uncertainty. But when he got there, the lights were off, the door was locked, and on the window, taped from inside, was a small note in Clara's handwriting. He leaned closer and read, sometimes honesty hurts more than silence, but I owe you the truth. Meet me tonight by the lighthouse, 7 p.m. Ethan felt his heart skip. The lighthouse, the one by the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, was the place she once said she went when she needed to think, to breathe. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket. Whatever truth she was finally ready to share tonight. He wasn't sure he was ready for it, but he knew he had to go. The night wind carried the scent of salt and sea. Waves crashed gently against the rocks below as the beam of the lighthouse swept across the dark horizon. It was quiet, almost hauntingly so, when Ethan arrived. He stood at the edge of the cliff, his breath visible in the cold. The snow from yesterday had melted, leaving only damp earth and the steady rhythm of the ocean. He checked his watch. 6:58 p.m. And then, he saw her. Clara was standing near the lighthouse railing, wrapped in a cream-colored coat, her hair tousled by the wind. For a moment, she looked unreal, a figure caught between light and shadow, fragile yet strong. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to run to her, to ask why she'd disappeared, why her note sounded like both a goodbye and a confession. But when she turned and smiled, that same soft, innocent smile, his words disappeared. Hey, she said quietly. You came. Of course, I came, he replied. You left a note that scared me half to death. She looked down, brushing her fingers over the icy railing. I didn't mean to worry you. I just needed to find the courage to say this face to face. Ethan took a step closer. Clara, whatever it is, you can tell me. She nodded, her eyes glistening in the lighthouse glow. That's exactly the problem. You make me want to tell you everything, and I've never been good at that. He waited, saying nothing, letting her take her time. The sea roared below them, the waves echoing like distant thunder. Clara exhaled shakily. You know, I told you I was engaged once. That part was true. But what I didn't tell you was that I left the night before the wedding? Ethan froze. You left him. She nodded slowly. I stood there, in my dress, looking at myself in the mirror, and realized I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I loved him once, or maybe I loved who I thought he was, but deep down, I knew I was marrying someone who didn't see me anymore. He loved the idea of me, the cheerful, smiling Clara, who never argued, never asked for more. But the truth, she looked up at Ethan, her voice trembling. The truth is, I was lonely even while standing beside him. Ethan's heart ached at her words. He could almost see her standing there in that white dress, smiling for everyone else, while breaking inside. So you left? He asked softly. I left everything, she said. The apartment, my job, the city, even my friends. I got in my car and just drove until I ran out of tears. That's how I ended up here in Willowbrook. I promised myself I'd never fall in love again, because love, to me, felt like a performance. She paused, her gaze steady now, brave in its vulnerability. And then you showed up, and I started smiling again without pretending. The wind picked up, tugging at her hair. Ethan's throat tightened. Clara, she shook her head gently. You deserve to know who I really am before you decide to care. I've been running, Ethan, from people, from love, from myself. And when you looked at me with those honest eyes, I realized I couldn't keep running anymore. He took a deep breath, stepping closer until they were only a foot apart. You think honesty will push me away? Her lips curved into a sad smile. It usually does. Ethan reached out, his hand hovering near hers. Not this time. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. It was cold, trembling but real. You make it sound easy, she whispered. It's not, he said softly, but it's worth it. The lighthouse lights swept across them again, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted ground. For the first time, Clara didn't look away. She met his eyes, open, unguarded, and beautifully honest. I'm tired of pretending I'm fine, she admitted, her voice cracking. But I'm scared, Ethan. What if I'm too broken to start again? He squeezed her hand gently. Then we'll start from wherever you are, together. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The only sound was the ocean and the slow rhythm of their breaths. Then, a small, fragile smile appeared on her face, not the practiced one he'd first seen, but something genuine. Ethan, she whispered, I didn't expect you to say that. He smiled faintly. You didn't expect a lot of things, did you? Her laughter was quiet, like the sound of something healing. No, I didn't expect to care again. I didn't expect you to see through me, and I definitely didn't expect this. She stopped mid-sentence, her expression changing, serious, uncertain. What? He asked. Clara hesitated, eyes glimmering in the light. There's one more thing you don't know. The warmth in her voice turned heavy, almost hesitant. What is it? Ethan's heart pounded harder. She looked away, her voice barely a whisper. The man I left, he's not completely out of my life. The air between them froze. Before Ethan could respond, the lighthouse light swept over her face again, revealing not guilt, but fear. And that's when Ethan realized, her story wasn't over, not even close. The wind at the lighthouse grew colder, sharper, as if the sea itself was listening. Ethan felt the air thicken between them, the warmth of their moment replaced by a quiet dread. He searched Clara's eyes, trying to understand. What do you mean? He's not out of your life. Clara looked away, her voice low and uneven. I thought I'd left him behind. Ethan, I really did. But some people don't let you leave quietly. Ethan frowned. Are you saying he came here? She nodded slowly. About a month ago, I started getting letters. No return address, no name, but I knew his handwriting. He said he forgave me, that he just wanted to talk. I didn't reply. But the last one, her voice trembled, the last one said he found out where I live. The words hit Ethan like ice. Clara, have you told anyone? The police, a friend. She shook her head. I didn't want to make it real. I thought maybe if I ignored it, he'd stop. Ethan exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. You shouldn't have had to face that alone. Clara gave a faint, tired smile. I've been alone for so long. It started to feel normal. Ethan stepped closer. You're not alone anymore. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the waves below them echoing like a heartbeat. Clara's face softened, her eyes searching his as if afraid to hope. I wanted to tell you sooner, she said quietly, but I didn't want you to think I was some broken story waiting to be fixed. Clara, Ethan said, his tone gentle but steady, you're not broken. You're just human. And I didn't come into your life to fix you. I came because somehow, without even trying, you made me want to stay. Her lips parted slightly, caught between disbelief and emotion. The wind tangled her hair, but she didn't move. Ethan reached out, brushing a strand away from her face. His touch light, careful. Her eyes glistened in the lighthouse glow. Why are you being so kind to me? Because you've been kind to everyone but yourself, he said softly. And someone has to remind you that you still deserve peace. Clara let out a small laugh, shaky, tearful, but real. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, he said, but it's honest. And I think that's what we both needed. They walked along the cliffs after that, slowly, letting the sound of the sea fill the gaps their words couldn't. Ethan told her about Boston, how he'd once been engaged to, how his fiancée had left when his career fell apart. He'd built walls ever since, pretending to be fine while quietly drowning in regrets. Clara listened quietly, her expression softening with every word. So, we're both running from ghosts, she said gently. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's why we found each other. She stopped walking and turned to him, the wind brushing past them. Maybe we were meant to. Their eyes met again, the kind of gaze that felt like both an ending and a beginning. The moment hung between them, fragile, real, and full of the things neither of them had dared to say before. But before Ethan could speak, Clara's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She hesitated, pulling it out. The screen lit up, her breath caught. Ethan noticed the color drain from her face. Clara, what is it? Her voice was barely a whisper. It's him. He froze. The man you left. She nodded, staring at the message on her screen. Her hand trembled as she handed it to Ethan. The text was simple. You can't hide forever. I'm in Willowbrook. Ethan's chest tightened. Clara, tears filled her eyes. Not of panic, but of exhaustion, the weight of a past that refused to let go. I thought I'd escaped this part of my life. He took her hands firmly. You're safe now. We'll handle this. Together. She blinked, staring at him, as if trying to believe it. Then, slowly, she nodded. Together, she whispered. That night, Ethan didn't let her go home alone. He walked her back to her small cottage on Maple Lane, where the porch light flickered against the night sky. The air smelled like pine and sea, comforting, yet heavy with everything unspoken. Clara turned at her door, her voice soft. Ethan, I don't know how to thank you. He smiled gently. You don't have to. Just promise me one thing. What's that? He met her gaze, steady and warm. Don't face the past alone anymore. Not when you don't have to. She nodded slowly. Okay. But as she stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her, Ethan couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his chest. The message, the tone. It wasn't just a memory haunting her. Something told him this wasn't over. And somewhere deep inside, Clara knew it too. That night, as she sat by the window with her sketchbook open but untouched, Clara stared out at the streetlights. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but her heart was racing. The snow had started falling again, quiet, steady. And just before she turned off the light to go to bed, she noticed something. A car parked across the street, engine off, headlights dimmed, but someone was inside. Watching, her heart stopped. The smile she once used to hide behind faded completely. The snow fell quietly through the night, blanketing Willowbrook in white. The little coastal town slept peacefully, all except for Clara. She stood by the window of her cottage, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the shadowed car across the street. It hadn't moved for nearly an hour. Its headlights were off, but she could see the faint shape of someone inside. Her breath fogged the glass. She didn't move, didn't dare. Finally, with shaking hands, she reached for her phone and called Ethan. He answered instantly, his voice groggy but alert. Clara, what's wrong? Her voice was barely a whisper. He's here, Ethan. Outside my house. Within minutes, Ethan was on his way. Clara could hear the distant hum of his truck before she even saw it turn the corner. When his headlights swept across her driveway, relief washed over her like a tide breaking through fear. He stepped out, coat unbuttoned, his breath visible in the freezing air. Stay inside, he called softly, his eyes scanning the street. But the car was gone. Just like that. Vanished into the snow-covered night. Ethan walked the block twice, checking every corner, every shadow, before finally returning to her porch. She opened the door slowly, the worry in her eyes clear. "It was there, Ethan. I swear it." He nodded gently. "I believe you, but it's gone now." She looked down, clutching her hands. Maybe he wanted me to see him. Maybe that was the point. Ethan stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "Then he's trying to control your fear, and you can't let him." Her eyes welled up. "I don't know how not to be afraid anymore." He reached out, touching her shoulder lightly. "Then let me be afraid with you. That way, you're never alone in it." Something in his tone, steady, certain, made her finally breathe again. She nodded, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely powerless. They sat together on her small couch, the only light coming from the lamp near the window. The room smelled like coffee and pine wood, soft and safe. Ethan glanced at her sketchbook on the table, a half-finished painting of the sea at sunset. "You painted this?" She smiled faintly. "I started it the day we met. I didn't know why, but somehow that day felt important." He met her gaze. It was, for a long moment, they said nothing. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of everything that didn't need words. Then Clara took a deep breath, her eyes glimmering with quiet strength. "You know, I used to think my smile was my shield. If I looked happy enough, people wouldn't ask questions. They wouldn't see how lost I was inside." Ethan listened, his expression tender. "But now," she continued softly, "I'm learning that honesty isn't something to be afraid of. Maybe my smile can still mean something, but only if it's real." He reached out, gently taking her hand. "Clara, it already is." She blinked back tears. "You make me feel seen, Ethan. Not for who I was, but for who I'm trying to become." He smiled quietly. "That's all I've ever wanted." Outside, the snow fell heavier, the night calm again. Maybe it was over, or maybe it wasn't, but for once, Clara didn't care about what came next. She looked out the window again, half expecting to see headlights. Instead, she saw only falling snow, catching the glow of the streetlight like tiny sparks of hope. She turned back to Ethan. "You know," she said, "for the first time in years, I don't feel like running." He squeezed her hand. "Then stay here, in this moment, with me." Her smile returned, not the innocent one he'd fallen for, but the honest one she'd finally earned. Weeks later, the car never returned. The police traced the letters. Turns out her ex-fiancé had moved overseas, trying one last time to control her through fear. But Clara didn't crumble. She faced it head-on, with Ethan by her side. She reopened her studio, began painting again, not landscapes this time, but portraits filled with emotion, light, and truth. She titled her first finished piece "When I Finally Spoke Honestly." When Ethan came to see it, he stood quietly before it, smiling. "She looks free," he said. Clara turned to him, eyes bright. "She is," and as the winter sun poured through the window, warming the studio, she leaned her head against his shoulder, peaceful, certain, and brave. Because sometimes, the most innocent smile hides the deepest scars. And sometimes, when you finally tell the truth, love finds you right where you stopped pretending. The end.